Alright, so this is the new Garmin Venu 4, and while this looks pretty similar to the previous generation Venu 3, there's a huge slate of under-the-cover upgrades that changes this watch from what it was kind of known for before as a fitness-focused smartwatch to now having full-on sports watch features, essentially mirroring what they offer with their Forerunner 570. And in fact, the Venu 4 even has some big-ticket items that the 570 doesn't have. And I've been using the Venu 4 as my daily driver for quite a bit now, and I have to say that I'm pretty impressed with what this watch offers and how well it serve my needs. I usually lean towards Garmin's more sports-focused watches like their Forerunners as well as their higher-end Phoenixes, but I have to say that I'm pleasantly surprised with how much data this watch provides in terms of the health features as well as training feedback. And this was definitely an interesting direction for Garmin to go with here, offering this many sports features in their Venu lineup, which previously didn't include the more advanced training feedback that usually comes in their higher-end watches. But what I kind of appreciate about it is that it was all kind of hidden in this clean, more classic design. So in this video, I'll be going over everything this watch has to offer, like what's new versus the previous generation, all the health features, smartwatch features, as well as training feedback. And I'll also be sharing how accurate it is for stuff like running, cycling, weight training, as well as high-intensity interval training. And if you do find the information in this video to be useful, just do me a quick favor and hit that like button down below. It's a small thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. And by the way, you may see a little bit of flickering or banding on the display on some of the clips in this video, but that's just the frame rate on my camera not matching the refresh rate of the watch. You don't see that in real life. Alright, so first up, let's talk about price. So the Venu 4 comes in at $549, so that's going to be $100 more than the previous generation Venu 3 when that first came out. So let's talk about what you get for that extra money and if it's worth it. So just like before, it's offered in two different sizes, and the one I'm reviewing today is going to be the 45mm model, and just for reference, I have a 185mm circumference wrist. So for the design and construction, so they kept with that same clean classic look, but they're now using more metal on the case. And to get around the device, so it uses a touchscreen along with two physical buttons. So the touchscreen works just like any other touchscreen out there. So from the watch face, you'll just swipe up from the bottom to bring up the list of widgets. So like here, we can see all the health features and training feedback the watch provides, and we'll go ahead and take a look at this list in a little bit more detail here in just one bit. And then with the lower right hand button, so this is going to act as a back button anywhere from the interface, and then the upper right hand button, so this will bring up the list of sport profiles or the activities that you can track, and then you'll use the touchscreen to select a profile, and then when you're ready to start your activity, you'll just press the upper right hand button again. And then during your activity, you'll use the touchscreen to swipe through the different data pages, and then once you're done with your activity and you're ready to save, you'll press the upper right hand button again and then tap on save your activity. One difference though between the Venu 4 and the previous generation Venu 3 is that they actually removed the third middle button they had on the Venu 3, and to be honest, I'm not exactly sure why they did that, because I thought it was super useful where you could assign that button to a shortcut, like you could have it enable the voice assistant on your phone, for instance. Now, even though the Venu 4 comes with a ton of new sports features, one thing to consider here is that using the touchscreen is required to get around the interface, and while this is super convenient, especially for getting around the interface quickly, like scrolling through menus, using the touchscreen in some sports scenarios can be kind of tricky, like if your hands are sweaty or if you have gloves on. So this is definitely going to be a big difference between this watch and something like the Forerunner 570. And then for the display itself, so this now has a brighter display than what's found on the previous generation Venu 3, and this thing gets crazy bright. Like there is zero issue seeing this outdoors, even in the sunniest of conditions. Now when it comes to battery life, so this will mainly depend on if you choose to use the always on display mode or not, as well as how many outdoor activities that you track. So if you choose to use the always on display, what happens here is that the display dims to a lower brightness when you're not interacting with it, and then to wake it up to full brightness, all you have to do is turn your wrist or tap on the display or press a button. So with this kind of mode, this allows you to see the time or other information at a glance without necessarily having to watch at full brightness. But in this mode, from my testing, I was getting around 4 to 5 days on the larger model here, but it's going to be a little bit less on the smaller version. And it will really depend on how many outdoor activities that you track. So like during the summer when I was doing more outdoor activities, I was getting like 4, almost 5 days, but now that it's getting a little bit colder outside and I'm doing more indoor workouts, it's going to be easily 5 days now. Now, if you want even longer battery life, so what you can do is turn the always on display off. And then what happens here is that the display turns off when you're not interacting with it. And then to wake it up, same as before, where you tap on the display or turn your wrist or press a button. But in this mode, the watch can last anywhere from like 10 to 12 days. Now, one trick to try though to extend battery life is to turn down the display brightness to the lowest brightness level, which I still find to be plenty bright. In fact, I'd almost almost like an even lower setting than what's found already, but putting it into the lowest brightness setting that helps it extend it about a day or so. And then when it comes specifically for battery life or tracking outdoor activities, they advertise anywhere from 13 hours to 20 hours depending on the size and which GPS mode that you use. And for my testing, I left it in the default auto select mode, and it was right in line with their claims of around 17 hours in their highest accuracy mode. Now, one of the biggest hardware upgrades they did with the Venu 4 is add their dedicated LED flashlight, and I was kind of surprised to see this in here. And all you have to do to enable it is just long press the lower right hand button and it turns on, and then you can adjust the brightness using the touchscreen, as well as turning it red if you'd like, which can sometimes be easier on the eyes at night. But this is one of those features that once you have it, it's kind of hard to imagine life without it. It's just incredibly useful in all sorts of situations, whether it's trying to find the bathroom without turning the lights on, taking the dog out in the middle of the night, and it can even provide a little extra safety when you're out on a run. Now, moving on to the more smartwatch related features. So the Venu 4 also has a speaker and microphone just like before. So with calls, you'll be able to speak on the watch itself as long as your phone is paired and in Bluetooth range. But do note that the Venu 4 doesn't have any cellular capabilities. But the speaker isn't just for calls, so you can also access the voice assistant from your phone like Siri or Google Assistant, and then there's also a voice command feature where you can control certain functions on your watch, like setting an alarm or even starting a workout. Now, when it comes to text and notifications, so you'll be able to receive notifications whether you use an iPhone or an Android phone, but responding to text is going to be a little bit different depending on which phone you have. So if you have an Android phone, you'll be able to respond to text with quick replies, an on-screen keyboard, as well as Google Assistant. However, with an iPhone, you'll be able to receive the text, but there's no quick replies or a keyboard. And the reason for this is that Apple locks down iMessage reply functionality to just Apple Watches. They don't allow other companies to tap into that feature, unfortunately. However, the Venu 4 does have a slight workaround for this where you can reply using Siri's, like saying something like, reply to mom, I'll be over in 10 minutes or something like that. And then the Venu 4 also has offline music capabilities where you can download tracks to the watch itself from streaming services like Spotify as well as Amazon Music, where you can listen to music with a pair of Bluetooth headphones while you're out on your run without having your phone with you. And then it also has contactless payments with Garmin Pay, so you can grab that post-run copy. And they've also added some new accessibility features to the Venu 4, like now there's a new feature where it can speak out the information on your watch face as well as some health data, and there's also some new color filter options for color vision impairment, and then you can also change the font size based on your preference. And then for health features, so the Venu 4 actually comes with every health feature Garmin has to offer. So it has their latest heart rate sensor that can also take an ECG, it can track your blood oxygen saturation levels, it calculates your calories burned, it tracks steps, floors climbed, and it also includes Garmin's body battery feature, which can give you indication of your current energy level based on sleep and activities. And then on the sleep side of things, again, this is where the Venu 4 has everything Garmin has at this point, where it tracks your sleep and it also gives you a sleep score, along with tracking your sleep stages. But beyond that, there's also new features surrounding their sleep coach feature. So with Sleep Coach, so this is supposed to give you an idea of how much sleep you may need tonight based on your previous night's sleep, as well as other factors like your activity history. So basically, if you didn't sleep that well the night before, or if you had a lot of activity throughout the day, it may suggest more sleep tonight. And then on the flip side, if you had a great night of sleep the night before and had more of a restful day, it may suggest less. But it goes beyond that now though, where they also have a new sleep alignment feature, and this is all about your circadian rhythm, or basically your body's natural sleep clock, and it can give you a range of how well you're adhering to that schedule. And another factor they're now considering is sleep consistency, and this is about how well you're adhering to your sleep schedule, like if you consistently go to bed right around like 9 to 10 p.m. or if your sleep falls outside that window. And there's also two more features that they introduced with the Venu 4. So the first of which is their health status feature. So what this does is it specifically tracks sleep metrics like your heart rate variability, respiration rate, skin temperature, as well as blood oxygen saturation level. And after wearing the watch for a bit, it establishes a baseline range and lets you know if you're in or outside of range. And if one or more of those metrics goes out of range, it'll give you an alert, and then you can maybe check in to see if something may have actually caused that, like maybe a late night meal, drinking alcohol, or possibly even getting sick. And then with their lifestyle logging feature, so what this allows you to do is track specific habits, both good and bad, and after a few weeks, you'll be able to look at different stats like sleep, heart rate variability, and stress to see what may be actually making a positive or negative impact on those metrics. Now, the lifestyle logging feature actually is available for some other watches as well, but the thing that Garmin introduced with the Venu 4 specifically is the ability to log those directly on the watch itself versus other watches where you can only log those through the Garmin Connect app. But I'm not entirely sure how useful this feature is at this point, where I'm not necessarily getting much out of this data, where some of the correlations don't make a lot of sense, like sunlight making a negative impact on HRV. That doesn't really add up in my mind, but on the other hand, the sugar NT right here, so that's a custom behavior I set up to track if I'm eating sugar at night. Well, that definitely has a negative impact on my sleep and other metrics. But I'm definitely going to have a follow-up video on lifestyle logging specifically, so stay tuned for that. Now, when it comes to sport profiles and what kinds of activities that you can track, so this is another area where they made a surprising amount of updates, where this is actually a full-on multi-sport watch where it can track all the common stuff like running, cycling, and stuff in the gym, but also pool swimming and open water swimming. It can track triathlon. It also has a lot of indoor profiles like yoga and Pilates, and there's also a lot of outdoor recreation profiles like skiing, snowboarding, paddleboarding, and lots of team sports and racket sports. And then when it comes to the kinds of data that the Venu 4 can collect, again, a pretty big update here for, let's say, something like running. It not only collects the stuff that you'd expect like pace, distance, cadence, calories burned, as well as heart rate, but also more advanced running dynamics like ground contact time and vertical oscillation, which you could potentially use to help dial in your running form. And then another example would be something like weight training or strength training, where it can also attempt to automatically count your reps, and it can even try to identify what actual movement that you're doing. And it does a decent job for the most part at rep counting, although there are times for some reason or another it kind of gets thrown off. And then it also actually does a pretty good job at identifying more common exercises like bench press and arm curls, but there are definitely occasions where it doesn't know what you're actually doing, like on these squats, which are actually deadlifts. But you can go ahead and edit your reps on the fly if you'd like, as well as enter the weight for each set. And then you can also edit this information after the fact in the Garmin Connect app if you'd prefer to not do that during your workout. And related to that, you don't need to do any of this rep counting stuff if you prefer to just do your strength training workout and not have to interact with your watch. That function is just there if you actually want to track those stats. And then when it comes to training feedback, so this is probably the biggest software upgrade that they did with the Venu 4, where this has nearly everything that Garmin has to offer when it comes to more advanced feedback, where you can estimate your running VO2 max, and it also has a race time predictor for times you could potentially achieve based on your running history. It can also estimate your cycling VO2 max and FTP if you pair the Venu 4 with a cycling power meter. It can track your training status, and this basically gives an indication of how productive or possibly unproductive your recent training may be. And this is all based on performance-related metrics like how much training load that you have at a given time, as well as how balanced your training load is, as in having a nice balance of zone 2, high aerobic, as well as anaerobic training. The most surprising training feature they added with the Venu 4, though, is going to be Garmin's training readiness feature. And this again was something that Garmin had previously only reserved for their higher-end sports-focused watches, and now training readiness is on the Venu 4. And this is all about how ready you are to perform at a given point in time. And this is going to be more based on recovery stats, where if your sleep, heart rate variability, and recovery time indicate that you've recovered well, while your training readiness score may be higher, indicating that you could put out a strong effort. And the difference between training status and training readiness is that training status is more about how productive or unproductive your training has been, where training readiness is more forward-looking, as in how good a performance you could potentially do. And then when it comes to navigation during your outdoor activities, so the Venu 4 has what they call breadcrumb style navigation. So when you're out in your outdoor activity, you'll be able to see the path that you've taken, and then you can use that path to get you back to your start location. And then in addition, you can also load in predetermined routes where it can give you turn-by-turn directions. And this is actually going to be the same as the Forerunner 570, but just like the Forerunner 570, the Venu 4 doesn't have full-blown maps like can be found in their higher-end Venu X1. Now, when it comes to actually tracking outdoor activities, another upgrade they added with the Venu 4 is what they call a multi-band or dual-band satellite chipset. So with this kind of technology, it's able to access multiple satellite frequencies at one time. And where this technology can be useful is going to be in scenarios where you may not have a clear view of the sky, like around a lot of heavy tree cover, tall canyon walls, or around tall buildings. Those optics can actually block satellite signals, so by accessing more than one satellite frequency, it has a better chance of being more accurate. Now, I actually never had any problems with the previous generation Venu 3. It was already a solid performer already with that single band chipset, and the Venu 4 is in that same department where it's a solid performer all around, and I've used it for everything from runs in the city to trail runs to gravel riding, and it was always very close to other devices when it comes to the total distance. And then when it comes to the finer detail of the GPS tracks themselves, same deal here, where it laid down some solid tracks all around, and there was no wavering or anything like that, and it was even solid on tight switchbacks as well as corners and curves at higher speeds. I also wanted to talk really quick about the different satellite modes that you can choose from here though. So by default, it should be set to this auto select mode. And what this does is that it's an intelligent setting where the watch chooses the best satellite mode based on your conditions. So if you're out in the wide open where there's nothing interfering with a clear view of the sky, you can use a single band mode, which requires less power. And if you get into an area where something may be blocking the sky, you can switch to a higher accuracy mode. And this is all in an effort to save on battery life. The dual band or dual frequency modes, while they are more accurate, also require a lot more power, so it's only enabling that mode when it needs them. And the auto select mode is what I use for all my testing, and that's actually the mode I personally use on my other Garmin devices, where I basically feel it provides the best balance of accuracy and battery life. Oh, and then one more thing in regards to outdoor accuracy is altimeter accuracy in regards to the elevation gain, and again, no complaint there as well. Alright, so now let's move on to heart rate accuracy, and the first thing I usually do is test it with indoor cycling, which I find provides a good baseline to get an idea of how accurate a sensor may be. It's generally an easy activity for any watch to get right, and all good stuff out of the Venu 4, whether that's steady state rides as well as intervals. Now moving outside though, so this is where we start to throw more variables into the mix, like bumps and vibrations from the road, or gravel for that matter, which can make a watch bounce around the wrist. And this is where we can see it wander a bit more from time to time, but overall these are still some really good results. And then for running, I had some decent results here as well for the most part. Like on this run here, pretty much in line with the other external sensors I was wearing, and then on this interval run right here, quite good as well, although a little bit of a hiccup right here on this interval. I did however have this one right here where I got caught in what's called a cadence lock, where the watch can actually misinterpret the rhythm of your footsteps as heart rate. Not really wildly off by any means, but I did want to mention that. And then when it comes to weight training and high intensity interval training, so these are notoriously hard activities to track with a watch, and that's all due to the location of the sensor being on our wrist. During weight training, we're gripping onto dumbbells, which tenses our wrist, which can affect blood flow, and then there's also varying arm movement, which can throw these sensors off. And this is where I wasn't getting as accurate results as the other examples. However, these still aren't bad for these kinds of activities. There were some misses on these bench presses at the beginning, and also had some issues with the arm curls right here. However, did a really good job at the intervals at the end. Now, if you want even more accurate heart rate from the Venu 4, you can actually pair up an external heart rate strap if you'd like, but this brings up one last thing that they upgrade with the Venu 4 is that the ability to pair a ton of new sensors. So there's a boatload of external sensors you can now pair up, including Garmin's inReach satellite communication devices. But ultimately, I've been pretty impressed by the Venu 4, and being someone who typically uses a more sports-focused watch like let's say a Forerunner or a Phoenix, I've been pleasantly surprised at how well the Venu 4 has fit my needs. It provides nearly everything in terms of tracking different kinds of sports I do, every bit of health feedback I need, pretty much all the training feedback that I like to geek out on, as well as even pairing to all the external sensors I use. Where this kind of gets weird though is that this watch has nearly all the same sports features as their Forerunner 570, but actually comes with two additional features being ECG as well as the built-in flashlight. On the flip side, this watch only has 2 buttons versus the 570, which has 5. And this puts us in kind of an awkward place when deciding between these two watches. Do we want more features with the Venu 4 but have less buttons, or do we want more buttons but have less features? It's kind of strange really. But after wearing this watch as my daily driver for quite a bit now, I actually do get that whole having less buttons, which makes for a cleaner look. The 570 is a great looking watch, but it still does look like a sports watch. This just has a much cleaner look to it, but the compromise here is not being as convenient in some sports scenarios. Now, in regards to price and if you should upgrade, well, this is $100 more than the previous generation Venu 3, and in general, I think it's kind of hard pressed to say it's worth upgrading with every new generation of any kind of technology that comes out. I think that most tech is worth upgrading like every other generation or more where we see bigger leaps. But this actually may be an exception here where this not only comes with way more sports features than the Venu 3, but it also comes with the flashlight. Anyhow, if you have any questions about the Venu 4 I didn't cover in this video, feel free to drop a comment down in the comment section down below. And on your way down there, if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel for plenty more sports tech videos just like this. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.